Hello, and welcome to another Hip Historian Virtual Happy Hour Tour. I am Brenda with AARP. We are the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. With a nationwide presence, AARP strengthens communities and advocates for what matters most to more than 100 million Americans 50 plus and their families: health security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. AARP also produces the nation's largest circulation publications, the AARP Magazine and AARP Bulletin. To learn more, please visit aarp.org/about-AARP. In the month of June, AARP offers events and enriching experiences close to home and from your home that help you make connections and serve others. While our situations are different, our need for connection is universal. Now more than ever, we know that connecting with family and friends is vital to aging well and living longer and happier lives. Visit us at aarp.org/local for more information. Thank you again, and with that, I'll turn it over to Marshall.
Folks, welcome to the show. Get ready to meet your host for the night, Arizona's very own hip historian himself, Marshall Shore.
Hello and good evening. I want to welcome you all to Arizona History Happy Hour. I am so glad you can join us this evening. Oh my gosh, we are going to have so much fun tonight. Now, I know we've got a bunch of folks out there watching on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, and even Facebook. If you miss this episode or any others, you can go back and catch them all on Hip Historian on YouTube. You can do that. And without any further ado, let's go on and talk a little bit about today being July 27th. Oh my gosh. So today, back in 1864, John Allen made the first application for homestead land in all of Arizona. Now, he also got the nickname Pie Allen because he originally moved here to make a fortune in mining out near Yuma, then wound up in Tucson making pies. It was so successful that he wound up buying a ranch, a farm, wound up becoming part of the territorial legislature, as well as a two-term mayor of Tucson. Now, it is also National Chicken Fingers Day. Those go by so many other names, whether it be chicken tender strips, whatever you call them. They are typically made with white meat from the chicken's breast, but other meat can be used, which is kind of a scary idea, but there you go. All right, so 1866, back on this date, a telegraph cable was laid from the Atlantic Ocean to connect Europe to North America. It was a monumental moment of history that allowed communication. It took a total of 12 years to build that project. Also, time to grab a spoon and get ready to make a big crunch, because back in the day, somebody thought, I've got this custard. I should take some sugar and put a torch on it. And you know what? They thought it was a good idea, but come to find out it was not just a good idea, it was a great idea. And so that is known as creme brulee, or in French, burnt cream. All right. And so it is also National Bagpipe Appreciation Day. Some people have called some folks I know a windbag, maybe more on that later. But that ancient instrument has been played at weddings, battles, funerals, parades, royal occasions. It's part of that Scottish tradition. And so hopefully, pop in your favorite CD or on Spotify of a bagpipe player. It is also National Refreshment Day, which is always on the fourth Thursday of the month. and is really encouraging folks to celebrate during the hottest time of the year. And boy, did they get that one right. And to toast those moments with ice and cold refreshment, whatever that might be, from water to more. Well, what can you expect from this evening? Well, we've got a little bit of trivia coming up, and of course, an amazing guest, a little Arizona bit, a beverage, and of course, some music history as well. If this is your first time watching, you might wonder, who is that man and why is he on my screen? Well, my name is Marshall Shore, and I got here a little over 23 years ago. I was in Brooklyn working at a beautiful Carnegie building and decided to trade that snow, that slush, that wind, like so many of you did as well, and moved to someplace sunny. That would be right here in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, I was working in a little library in South Phoenix that had a rich oral tradition of the community, and so I started learning about Arizona through its stories. And still doing that today. Why, this is actually my beautiful house. When we originally moved in, it was so many tones of beige on the outside, and now it is too, seafoam and cantaloupe. My kitchen is pretty much a time capsule. Well, pretty much my whole house is a time capsule full of stuff, but maybe more on that later, maybe not. We shall see. But as soon as I got here, all I kept hearing about how there was no history here. But I didn't believe that, because every time I went for a ride on my bike, in a car, on a bus, on a trolley, whatever it was, I kept running across so many amazing people, places, and stories. Now, I'm also called the hip historian, which means I get to have fun with Arizona history in so many different ways. Why, in fact, one of the topics that we're going to be talking about tonight is coming up in August. The Buckhorn Baths is going to have an exhibit going on at the Mesa Historical Museum. So more on that in just a little bit. Also, the end of September at the All-One House, we're going to be doing our sixth banned book reading. And coming up, the Orpheum Theater is celebrating 95 years of being open that first weekend of January in 2024. And so we are going to be doing Arizona Unzipped, which is an educational burlesque show. So more on that as we get access to tickets and things like that. Now, please reach out to me. I love to hear from you all. So these are the ways you can do it: through Facebook, Instagram, email, or website, all using that hip historian moniker. So now we get a chance to talk about something else. So, we're going to talk about some Arizona history, but we're going to talk about Little Arizona. So, so today we're going to be talking about Ehrenberg, Arizona. Since we're talking our topic on tonight has a little bit to do with transportation and how highways gave rise to one business in Mesa. And so we're going to talk about Ehrenberg. So back in the 1860s, a German miner named Hermann Ehrenberg was hired to survey a new town on the Colorado River that was called Mineral City. It then began to grow and attract businesses. And pretty soon, it was a full-fledged town. Now, it was right on the Colorado River, and so there was steamboats bringing business and people and residents. But those steamboats lasted until the early 20th century, and then trains started taking over. And so the town's population started to dwindle until pretty much most of the buildings in town were demolished for a trailer park. Now, they do still have a historic cemetery there, so you can go see some history buried. First burial took place in the late 1860s, and right up into the 80s, people were being buried in this area. All right. You can also go for an amazing adventure at the Cibola National Wildlife Refuge, which is not far away, which I highly recommend. And then not far away are the Blythe and Tagliatos, which are these really large Figures drawn in the earth. Were they done for spacemen? Were they done as art? You decide. All right. And you know, it would not be happy hour without a happy hour beverage. And so tonight we are doing an apple teeny. And so there you go. You mix a little bit of vodka, well, actually a lot of vodka, a little bit of apple schnapps, some lemon juice, and simple syrup. Oh, and it's kind of a little sour. Tastes almost like a Jolly Rancher, a boozy Jolly Rancher. Well, there you go. All right. Oh, and we're not talking about St. John's. We almost did. But so now we're going to talk about something completely different. Well, not really, but someplace I really wish that I could have soaked my blank in. But by the time I got here, that was not an option. By the time I got here in 2000. And so what I did was I found an iconic sign that launched me into a passion of Arizona signage. And we are going to bring on an amazing guest. Just you wait. It is my friend Jay Mark. At least if he's still there. He may have already. Oh, there he is. Oh, and I like those glasses.
Well, good evening, Marshall. And thanks for inviting me back. I thought after the last time, I was surprised the show was still continuing. And I'm happy to be here. But a couple of things in the beginning. And I really wanted to show you that you're not the only one that can wear outrageous glasses. And then you have, I don't know.
I know, I'm actually kind of tame today.
Yes, very tame. And these are very special glasses, I want you to know, because I have the ability to move them around and wink, wink.
Oh.
Oh, how about that?
Nice.
All right. Well, I'm going to take them off because it's a little hard.
You can just put the lenses
with
down.
them on. Oh no, there it is. That's fine. We'll let them go with that. That's really good. And also, I have a real beef with you.
Uh-oh.
And I'm not sure even if I really want to continue tonight, because it seemed to me when you contacted me, you made a promise.
I know I did.
And not only did you make the promise that you did not keep, but you've just gone ahead and insulted me. You're drinking the apple teeny, and that really, if you should excuse the expression, pisses me off. But what it was missing is the maraschino cherry. You gotta put a maraschino cherry in it. And here I am with a little bit. Oh, you can't even see it. Oh, there it is. I put vodka in a water bottle.
I was going to say, I know what you did already. So you're just upset you didn't have any apple schnapps to add to it.
So, you know, I thought we were friends, and you assured me that I would have some refreshments to loosen me up. And I'm left with nothing here while you're guzzling the apple teeny. So with that, thank you for the invitation. Carry on the show, and I'll see you next time. One more thing, because you sit here and converse with everybody and interview and do things like that. Nobody gets to interview you, and I'm not going to spend the whole hour trying to do that. But at least I have one question for you. How the hell do you do it? You are everywhere. You never seem to stop. I don't even know if you sleep at night. You know, I'm in Las Vegas, I'm in Ehrenberg, I'm here. Tomorrow I'm going to be there. I'm surprised you know where your house is. And you and I are very close to the same age. And I can't do it. So I think all your friends and fans would like to know, how the hell do you do that?
You know, it's some days, there are days where I'm like, I'm just staying in bed. But of course, the computer comes out and then I start researching. So even downtime is not downtime.
Well,
you know, there's always another story. That's the thing. It's like no matter how much you think you know about something, all of a sudden somebody you mentioned to off to the side is like, oh, wait a minute, there's this little piece that's like a game changer. And so that's the thing. It's always that hunting for the next piece.
Well, anybody that follows you on social media knows that almost every day you're somewhere else or doing something or doing multiple things all in one day. And I'd like to say I admire you for that, but I just am too tired to even think about that.
Well, I like so Anita says it's coffee, lots of coffee. Actually, her husband has these little caffeine mints.
Yeah.
So those have been quite helpful.
Well, I don't have the mints, but I do have Fisherman's Friend.
Ah, very good. Which
that
is important.
Doesn't do a lot. It tastes terrible, but it does get you going. So anyway, I just wanted to get that out of the way. Someday you can invite me and I'll interview for the hour, because I think you've got an interesting background besides the time that you spent here. And so I think more people ought to know about that.
Well, maybe we'll do a turnabout show. That would be kind of fun.
Yeah.
So, okay, I do have to admit I'm a bit of a schmuck because you sent me a bio and I just realized I didn't print it out.
You want me to read it?
Sure. If you want to read your own bio,
No, it usually, when I'm introduced, people will say that J. Mark did a lot of things, nothing really worth mentioning, however, and he didn't do anything well. And that pretty well sums up my life. I've been very active, had the good fortune of not being a bank teller and doing the same thing every day, counting someone else's money. I've had a lot of variety in my life, and that's pretty much the whole story. The other is bullshit.
Well, there you go. And Appletinis, bullshit.
And so now I don't even get a damn biography. I don't get an Appletini. And you put down my glasses, and oops, they're upside down.
I was going to say, wait a minute.
No, they work well this way too.
So I know
it was a pleasure. Nice to talk to you. We'll see you next time.
So you did write. So, okay. So for me, one of the things that got me going on just talking about history was the Buckhorn Baths, driving out through Mesa and seeing that sign. And it was like, oh my gosh, the moment I saw it, it's like, what's the story? And I know you co-wrote a book about the Buckhorn. And so that's kind of what we're talking about tonight, because people are still, almost everybody has a Buckhorn story, whether they went there, they didn't go there, their mothers went there and got pummeled and wrapped in towels, and so many stories. And so I'm glad you wrote a book. And so that's why we're doing exactly what we're doing tonight, because and from almost the moment I saw the Buckhorn is like, what's next for the Buckhorn?
Well, the Buckhorn is a very remarkable story on so many different levels that it's very difficult to tell its entire story. You start with the most visible feature of the Buckhorn, and that's the sign, which you can see behind me. It, without a doubt, is one of the most spectacular signs that was ever constructed in the valley, neon signs. And it was such a beacon for travelers that were coming in to the valley from Globe and Miami and Superior. You have to remember that when the Buckhorn was built, it was on a 2-lane road. The confluence of 60, 70, 80, and 89. Don't do that. Turn around or something. Don't do that. Sure.
Dueling vodka.
Oh, there you are again. You froze on me. So when this sign was installed, and that wasn't at the very beginning of the Buckhorn, this was a true beacon for people coming, particularly at night. You could see this on a road that was completely dark, no street lights, no stop signs, and it would have been visible, or at least glowing, for several miles. And I think even today, of course, that's its most attractive feature. And when you look at this photograph, you see a variety of colors. It is rather badly deteriorated at this point. It has really had no care for at least 16 years. So there's paint faded on it. I'm not sure why some of the neon is white, and it was all one color at one time. But I can tell you, the few times that it's been turned on, and you and I have done a couple of neon tours, and we come out there with a little busload of folks, 30, 35 people, to show them the sign, turn it on, and suddenly every car along Main Street stops, and horns honk, and people are getting out of their cars and taking selfies. It's truly a remarkable sign.
Indeed, it is. And so, I mean, and it's got such an amazing history that I think people just don't really understand the vastness of one building and what it could do. So hence that's why we're just using this to scratch the surface.
Sure. Well, the easiest way to explain it, put that graphic of the book back up. We need the money. Actually, the sale of this book, if I can make that pitch right in the beginning.
Indeed, please do.
Is I co-authored it with a very well-known preservation architect in the Valley in Arizona, really, Ron Peters. And we did it to assure that if something happened to the Buckhorn, that there would be documentation of its history. It's a formulaic book because of the publisher, but at least it's a start, and it's filled with photographs that have never been seen of the Buckhorn. But we don't get any of the proceeds. All of the money from the sale of the book and the tie, which
is an amazing tie.
Yeah, you need one of those. All goes to the Mesa Preservation Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to preservation in Mesa and the Valley. And the money we raise goes to various projects. We might get into talking about the Diving Lady sign just a few miles west of the Buckhorn. When it fell, it became the responsibility of the Mesa Preservation Foundation to restore it. And that little group raised about $125,000. So all the proceeds go back into the community through preservation efforts. But the story of the Buckhorn is really a story of a fire to empire, is what I like to call it. Ted Sliger came to the Valley in the 1920s with his father and leased a gas station on what is now Power Road north of Main Street, and sold gas and tourist related things, snacks, things of that sort. And he was also an amateur taxidermist, but very skilled.
Don't give away any of the trivia questions. Oh my gosh.
Oh, well, no, he was actually what trivia questions?
He played the bagpipes, didn't he? He played
yes, he did. He was a phenomenal bagpipist. And there's the clue, folks.
Okay, so before
you're going to restrict me in how I tell the story. Anyway,
so
they wound up with Ted met Alice, and then that was made into a movie, and they eventually got married and moved to a larger location that would give them more opportunities. And that was at what's now Record Road and Main Street. And from there, things began to develop from just not only a roadside stop for travelers, but also into what they became best known for, and that was their mineral baths. Why don't you ask the trivia questions first, and then I'll give you the answers.
Sounds good. All right. So with our
there we go. Speak of that. Where did that come from?
Indeed. It's almost like that was planned. All right. So you can keep track of your trivia answers. Here you can do it in the chat. You can do it on a piece of paper. I know Anita has a special notebook. So let's just go ahead and launch into a thermal spring that would lead to the Buckhorn Baths. What year was that discovery made? Was it A, 1927, B, 1931, C, 1939, or D, 1941? So one of those is the year they discovered thermal springs on property. All right. So question 2. The Sluggers were renowned for their hospitality and the healthful mineral spa. Ted was equally famed for what avocation? A, mineral collector, B, taxidermist, C, musician, see there's the bagpipes, or D, watercolor artist. So which one of those things was Ted also known for? All right, question 3. How did a desert mineral spa get the name Buckhorn? Was it because A, a dead buck was found on the new property? B, in a fire, the taxidermy collection was lost except for the buckhorn? C, Ted saw a beautiful buck with a large rack? Or D, Ted took out a random magazine. The first word was buckhorn. So one of those is the elusive story about how the buckhorn got its name. All right, question 4. The Buckhorn became famous for hosting 2 baseball teams before spring training. Who were the 2 teams? So you got to choose 2 letters. Is it A, the New York Giants? B, New York Yankees? C, Cleveland Indians? Or D, Chicago Cubs? So which one of those teams were so important to the history of baseball here in Arizona, as well as the Buckhorn? All right, question 5. Most black ball players were still the subject of Jim Crow segregation in the 40s and 50s. The Sluggers opened the Buckhorn to all. What players benefited from their hospitality? Was it A, Jackie Robinson, B, Willie Mays, C, Ernie Banks, or D, Monty Irvin? All right, which one of those players benefited from being able to stay at the Buckhorn Baths? All right, question 6. One of the most unique architecture features that could be found in some of the rock walls of the Buckhorn were on display and were what? A, a large collection of geodes, B, Arizona dinosaur bones, C, Indian metates, or D, flecks of lost Dutchman gold that Ted had discovered in the superstitions? All right, question 7. After Ted and Alice opened the baths, they began building casitas and later motel rooms. But there was a lack of one amenity in each room. What was it? A, bathtub, B, toilet, C, telephone, or D, television? All right, question 8. While discovery of the mineral hot springs is what gave the Buckhorn its fame, how did it come about? A, the Sluggers began drilling for black gold. B, hot water began coming out of the toilet. C, they began drilling for fresh water. Or D, laying the foundation for buildings, hot water just started shooting up out of the ground. Question 9. How did the Buckhorn become home to spring training for baseball? A. All teams were invited to come stay at the Buckhorn. B. A New York Times article was seen by one of the team owners. C. A ball player's car broke down at the Buckhorn. Or D. New York Giants team owner wanted a perk for his star players. All right, question 10. What cranky beast was put on display at the Buckhorn? Was it A, Big Bad Buffalo, BBB, or B, Old Renegade, C, Little Bighorn, or D, Old Cayuse? All right. So as you are locking in your final answers, we are going to take a little bit of an Arizona music break and talk about a band that was just inducted to the Arizona Music Hall of Fame called the Mogollon Band. So they started back in the 70s in high school. They became fast friends, started a band, moved to Phoenix, became really popular, started becoming a traveling band, and they stayed together as the members came and flowed. They recorded 4 albums. And recently, one of their long-term members passed away back in 2022. And they were just inducted last month into the Arizona Music Hall of Fame. All right. So now we get ready for some fun when the answers get to happen. All right. A thermal spring that would lead to the Buckhorn Baths was discovered in what year? And that is C, 1939. All right. Question 2. The Slaggers were renowned for their hospitality and the healthful mineral spa. Ted was equally famed for what avocation? And that would be B, taxidermist.
We gave that one away.
And indeed. So how much taxidermy was really at the Buckhorn?
At the Buckhorn itself, Ted, who was very fond of superlatives, claimed that there was a representation of all the wildlife in Arizona, numbering about 450. Beyond that, he had a collection of steer horns in the hundreds, deer heads all over the place, but 450 is what he had said. By the way, is it true that if somebody gets all of the answers right, that you give them a Lamborghini?
You mean an Appletini?
No, a Lamborghini.
Oh, they said Appletini.
Because I know the answers.
So that means you get an Appletini.
Yeah, well, where is it? I'm still drinking just my straight vodka.
So, yeah, that was one of the most striking features, I think, of looking in the window and seeing some of that taxidermy staring back out at you.
And since it closed, a lot of people have inquired about the disposition of that collection. Just to give you a little bit of background, Alice passed away just a month short of her 104th birthday in 1910. And there was a group in Apache Junction that wanted the collection. And Alice was kind of maintaining the Buckhorn to preserve it as a legacy, but she promised the group that she would donate that collection to them if they would build a museum to house it. That never happened. So when she passed away, the entire collection was in the Buckhorn. Really, the whole place was a time capsule. Then it went into private ownership hands, and the developer that bought it didn't want to fool with this collection because there's a lot of issues when you have old taxidermy, because one of the outgases is formaldehyde, and they just didn't want to fool with it. So ASU took the bulk of the collection, but probably maybe 75 pieces are still there.
Oh, I didn't realize there was anything left.
Yes, one of which will deal with
Okay,
one of
very
your
good.
trivia questions.
Okay, very good. Glad to hear that. All right. So, how did a desert mineral spa get the name Buckhorn? B. In a fire, the taxidermy collection was lost except for the Buckhorn.
What happened is Ted was doing his taxidermy in addition to the work at the gas station. He and his wife lived in a well, until he got married, he lived in the service station. And then when he got married, he didn't think that was good for with a wife. So they went out and bought a cottage for $250 and put it on the back of the property. Christmas Eve, 1935, he was out working on some taxidermy. And as the story goes, he tipped over either a lantern or a gas heater, and the whole place went up in flames. All of the collection was lost. The entire building was a total loss. The cottage was safe because it was behind the property. But shortly before this fire took place, he loaned to one of the restaurants in downtown Mesa a large buck with a nice antler rack. And when they were trying to come up with a name, because even when they moved, they still hadn't come up with Buckhorn, they decided to use that name in honor of the one piece of taxidermy that was left after the fire. So everything that was on the walls until it closed was work that came after the fire. He lost all of his collection, and then he was doing work for others too.
Wow. All right. The Buckhorn became famous for hosting baseball teams before spring training. Who were the two teams? The New York Giants and Chicago Cubs.
This story starts with the New York Giants. Horace Stoneham had a home in Paradise Valley, and Stoneham was the owner of the Giants. He would come out here every winter, and he was good friends with Bill Veeck, who owned the Cleveland Indians, and they trained in the spring in Tucson. And they were getting together, and Stoneham was lamenting the fact that he'd have to leave the valley to follow his team wherever it was training in the spring to get ready for the baseball season. And Veeck says, well, you know, I've got the Indians, you got the Giants. We could have them play each other, and we can work it out from there. So that's what they agreed to do. And in the meantime, somehow Stoneham got wind of the Buckhorn and went out there and took advantage of the spa treatment and that sort of thing. Very impressed with the place, and really liked Ted and Alice Sliger. They became lifelong friends as a result of all of this interest. And so it crossed Horace Stoneham's mind that, why don't I bring out my star players maybe a week ahead of the actual spring training time? And I'll put them up at the Buckhorn. They'll get the spa treatment. They'll get the massages. They'll be really ready to go when spring training starts. And so for 25 years, that's what he did. And when the Giants then moved to San Francisco, things changed. And by that time, the Chicago Cubs had been involved in spring training since World War II. They used to train on, Wrigley's Island. What's the name of Wrigley's Island?
Oh, Catalina.
Catalina. Coronado was in my head. But there was concern that was too dangerous, particularly with the war in Japan. So the Cubs then moved to Los Angeles, and the owner was not happy because that gave him a lot of carousing time at night. And he said, I need a quieter place because my team is drunk every day by the time they're spring training and it's not working well. And there's a lot of things behind the scenes, but the bottom line is they ended up coming to Mesa for spring training, and their star players spent time at the Buckhorn each spring. So there's a long, long history of baseball. And in fact, some of us would argue that we might not have the Cactus League if it wasn't for the Buckhorn.
And so that's a perfect lead into this next question. So most black ball players were still subject to Jim Crow segregation. The Slaggers opened the Buckhorn to all. And what players benefited from that hospitality? It's actually all of the above. Jackie Robinson, Willie Mays, Ernie Banks, Monty Irvin, and others.
Yep, they all played there. And that was one of the very unusual things about the Slaggers. They were not a couple that discriminated. And when the team was in Phoenix, for example, Willie Mays had to stay in a black neighborhood. He could not stay with the white teammates, and neither could the other players. But at the Buckhorn, it was open to all. And so if you happen to be a guest at that time, or they welcomed people, tourists were still coming by. You had a chance to meet these players in a natural kind of environment. This is before you were charged for autographs, and things were much more relaxed than they are today. And there are wonderful photographs in the book that show these players not in uniforms, but in Hawaiian shirts or a Western shirt like yours, just tossing the ball around or running through the desert. And color made no difference.
Now, will any of those photos be on display at the Mesa Historical Museum?
Yes, you will see, I believe, some of those on display. That's a good time to let people know. You've already mentioned it. The Mesa Historical Museum in August, what is it, the 19th?
The 19th, Saturday the 19th.
We'll have an exhibit on the Buckhorn and its history. And also, we've got a presentation, call it a slide presentation, about the Buckhorn. And we show a lot of the photographs that are in the book and others that may not make the exhibit. And that will be, the exhibit I think opens at 10 and the presentation will be at 9 in the morning. So it'll be a good introduction to the exhibit.
Indeed.
You come out, you can help me.
All right. All right. One of the most unique architectural features that could be found in some of the rock walls of the Buckhorn were the built-in display of what? And it was all those Indian metates.
This was a time before there were regulations, laws about possessing Indian artifacts, taking them off of public land. It's always been, if it was on private land, one could do whatever they wanted with them. And it is said that there were some metates out in the desert where the Buckhorn was found. But a lot of people knew that Ted began collecting metates. And for those that don't know what they are, it's 1/2 of a set that grinds corn. It's like a mortar and pestle. And the metate is the mortar, and another stone is used to grind corn into a fine meal. But Ted started collecting so many, and people were bringing them to him, he didn't know what to do with them. And so he started, everything he did was just out of his head. He had no plans on paper. Alice said that if he was going to build a new building, he'd kind of go out and look a little bit, and then with the heel of his boot, draw a line in the sand and said, well, this is where the wall is going to go. And he thought that it might really be intriguing because he was always trying to appeal to people from back east that wanted a Western experience, to put these metates into the walls. So around their wishing garden, that's all filled with metates. Their barbecue area had metates. There are hundreds of them.
Indeed. All right. After Ted and Alice opened the baths, they began building casitas and later motel rooms. But what was a lack of one amenity in each room? Bathtubs. So why were there no bathtubs in the rooms?
Well, think about that. What were they trying to sell? They were trying to sell their mineral baths.
As if I look at the sign, the biggest word on that sign is baths.
Yeah, that's right. And if there were bathtubs in the rooms, there would be no incentive for them to avail themselves of the mineral baths. That was the whole reason for that. They were sharp marketers.
Indeed. While the discovery of the mineral hot springs is what gave the Buckhorn its fame, how did it come about?
Well, again, the fire is what started everything. After the fire, the publisher of the Mesa Tribune, Charles Mitten, who was a friend of Ted and Alice, said, "I own a quarter section of land out by what's now Wrecker Road. And if you want to move, I'll sell you the land, as much land as you want. And as your business grows, I'll sell you more of it." So they initially took 5 acres for a very reasonable price. This you have to remember, and it's hard if you haven't been here for a long time. This was just barren desert with scrub brush, no trees, just scrub brush. And to bring water or provide water for the property, Ted twice a week went into town with his truck and some large barrels and filled them with water in Mesa. This is a 7-mile journey each way, and brought it out to the Buckhorn. So they did that for 3 years, and business was coming along and doing fairly well. So he thought, well, I've got enough money now. There are other ranchers and farms here. They're not hauling their water. I'm sure there's water in the ground. I'll drill for water. So he started drilling, got down about 300 feet, and lo and behold, like something out of a movie, a gusher came up, and there was plenty of water. Happened to be 112 degrees. It was filled with minerals. It was anything but potable. But again, he turns a negative situation into a positive. Someone said, this might be good. Why don't you send it off and have it analyzed? So he sent a sample to California, and soon he got back a notice that he had hit the mother lode. If you want a health spa, this is absolutely the best water. And that's when the idea of opening this health spa came about. And if you know Castle Hot Springs near Wickenburg, where all the elite of the world came in the 19th, early 20th centuries, it's on the same fault line that where the Buckhorn is. So it's exactly the same water as up near Wickenburg at Castle Hot Springs. So he still didn't have potable water. He had to haul it. And he opened the baths, and they started making some more money. He said, I know there's got to be drinking water down there somewhere. So they drilled in another location, went to 300 feet, nothing. Eventually, they had to go down to about 1,100 feet to hit water. But it was sufficient to turn what was a desert property into a thriving oasis, and made it so appealing to travelers. So if you go out there, all the palm trees, all the trees that are there were planted by the Sligers.
Wow, I didn't realize they did all that planting themselves.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow. All right. How did the Buckhorn become home to spring training for baseball?
I think we cover that.
We did indeed. I mean, it was Horace who basically decided to bring that team out here and wanted to give his people, all of his players, a really cool thing to do.
And it was celebrated each year. The Sligers had once they installed the sign, which was around 1940 or so, pretty early for a big neon sign.
Yeah.
They would hang from the sign a huge banner, welcome to the New York Giants, later to the Chicago Cubs. They always took a photograph under the sign with the whole team. So it was a big deal, and everybody in town knew that those ball players were out there.
Right. And I've even seen in the photos where the banner changes from when the New York Giants made a move from one coast to the next coast.
Yep.
So,
oh yeah. If you want to say one thing about Ted and Alice, they were opportunists and they were promoters. So I know somebody else, I can't remember his name. Oh, and you look a lot like him, that goes out and promotes everything. It's 115 degrees and he's promoting butter on the hood of his car, and people love it. So you and the Sligers share a lot, Marshall.
And then, oh my gosh, when we talk about the taxidermy of the Buckhorn, this is one of the reasons why I'm so glad to see that some of that taxidermy still remains. Is what cranky beast was put on display at the Buckhorn?
Well, that was came to be known as Old Renegade. This was a pretty aged buffalo that was harassing ranchers up in northern Arizona, causing a lot of havoc. Pretty mean old guy, grouchy, a curmudgeon, if you will. And so the Arizona Game and Fish knew about Ted. He was friends with a lot of those folks. Ted was a very good hunter. He'd take the baseball players on hunting expeditions, on fishing expeditions. But Game and Fish said, we got to get rid of this guy. Would you go up there and find him and dispatch him? And so Ted went up there. He spent with a couple of buddies, and they spent 3, 4, 5 days hunting it down. And eventually they got it. And this thing weighed well over a ton. And we have photographs in the presentation of them skinning it up north.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to taxidermy the thing. So they skinned it. They saved the meat, brought everything back to the Buckhorn, aged the meat. Meanwhile, he taxidermied the buffalo, and they called it Old Renegade, and put it on display in the Wildlife Museum. And then they had a barbecue. They were known for parties and barbecues out there. They fashioned a very innovative barbecue area. But this barbecue was probably the largest they ever had. Over 4,000 people came to that barbecue. And that's when Mesa's population was just about that, 4,000 or 5,000 people. So literally all of Mesa was out there at the barbecue. Obviously, Old Renegade, I don't think served everybody unless people got a little piece of meat. But they had so many activities going on. That's why not only the baseball players were there, but all sorts of celebrities. Even Ty Cobb came. This is long after his career, but he was at the Buckhorn. And many, many famous people. Harry Truman's sister was out there for 3 months because she had, I think, some back issues and used the baths as a healing process.
Wow. So, all right. Well, that is indeed our last question, but I always like to ask, how do people do on the trivia?
Lamborghini, if you got them 100%.
So, all
Your
right.
hair just turned a little grayer. So did the beard.
Indeed. So, but you know what I love to do is tell people, it's not what you got right, but oh my gosh, just look at the tip of the iceberg that we've scratched. And so tell us a little bit about this movie, Forget About It.
Well, people wonder, because the Buckhorn was so well known, what took place out there. Were there any films? And yes, there were films. One, and we're still trying to find. You're a good researcher. Maybe you can do it. An early video in the late '80s called "The Motel" was filmed out at the Buckhorn, and we have some stills. There were a lot of articles in the newspaper about it, and we want to believe that there has to be a copy of it somewhere in the archives at ASU. I've been in touch with the teacher that who supervised that, and she remembered doing it, but she hasn't been with ASU for years. And then now the date slipped me, but then Burt Reynolds and Raquel Welch and a whole bevy of stars filmed a movie in the Valley called Forget About It. And it's a bunch of old guys who wind up getting loot and trying to escape the bad guys that want to get it back and that sort of thing. And they did come out to the Buckhorn. They were out for 2 or 3 days filming. Ted Sliger, the son of the older Sliger, was out there at the time. In fact, he said he was in a scene or two. 3 days they spent filming it, and we show the clip, and unfortunately we can't get it running here tonight, but we do in the presentation. It runs about a little over a minute. 3 days of filming for one, but you see the Buckhorn, all of its neon at night. It's one of the best ways to document. This was done in the early 2000s before the Buckhorn closed. And then there's a scene inside one of the rooms. And we know even which room it was because we've made measured drawings of the entire property. And that's it. Only 2 movies out there. And typical of, well, I probably shouldn't editorialize. It's not my program. Most of the movies filmed out in Arizona aren't of the highest quality. And this happens to be one of them, but they show moments in time. And even though it's a short clip, nonetheless, we get to see the Buckhorn on film.
Indeed. And the rooms were pretty, I mean, it was so funny. I loved, I was able to go into a couple of the rooms at one point, and just, I mean, that old 30s furniture that was there was just spectacular.
A lot of the furniture was custom made for the Buckhorn. Alice wanted to really personalize it. So you've got embroidered bedspreads, pillows, lamps with the Buckhorn name or a Western theme. Remember, these are people coming from back east, and even in the later years of the Buckhorn, I know of a story. It didn't take place at the Buckhorn, but might as well have, of some folks from England visiting, and they wanted to know where would be a good place to spend a day, and Roosevelt Dam and the Apache Trail was mentioned. And he just turned white and he said, "Aren't there still Indians out there? Are we likely to get attacked?" And so the Buckhorn tried to convey a really unique, special place. Ted and Alice wore custom-made Western clothes, and Alice was, to some degree, well, not some degree, she was a hoarder. And a lot of her clothes are now and they'll be on display in this exhibit. And I think there's a postcard of Ted and Alice standing together, and the dress she's wearing in that postcard was rescued and should be in that exhibit.
Oh, cool. Well, and and when you talk about them being marketers, I mean, the next image is that sign.
The sign, yes.
That I mean, was that supposed? I'm wondering, was that supposed to be somewhere else because it looks so similar to the shape of the one next to you? I mean, was it a possible remodel?
Unfortunately, we don't know. This came when we were putting the book together. Ted, the son, found this, and it's not in great shape. It's a watercolor on board, or on a paper panel, and we don't know. He was too young to know the story. It's dated 1952, and if you look in the lower corner, there are dimensions for the sign. It is pretty big. It's something like 16 feet across. We think it might have been speculative. There's a whole side story. There's a property right next to the Buckhorn that's now part of the property, but originally was El Moro, and that was owned by the manager of the Valley Bank and his wife. They were not successful with it, and it only operated for a year or two, and then Ted bought him out. But it's some distance from the big Buckhorn sign, which is on the eastern edge of the property. And my supposition is that this might have been proposed for the western edge. It's all supposition. It's not signed, so we don't know who designed it. And knowing Alice's conservative nature, I'm not sure that she would have approved of the gal. I think it's kind of nice. I'd like to have seen it made. It's a mystery in the whole Buckhorn story, but because, like I say, it never got built.
Indeed. So we had talked about the Mesa Historical Museum is going to be putting on an exhibit opening up on the 19th of August. And so you're doing a presentation at 9 a.m. that morning?
At 9 a.m. Yep. And everything is free. So you don't even have to dig into your pockets. But that will give you a lot of background on the Buckhorn. You know, an exhibit can only produce highlights. You can't put 500 pieces of something. And there are a lot of books that people, or photographs that people have seen, but in the book and in the presentation are photographs that had never been viewed before. So it's really quite revealing.
Now, will the book be available at the museum if people want to buy it?
The book definitely will be at the museum, and you can get it signed. I will be there. I'm not sure about Ron Peters, if he'll be there, but I might be able to talk to him and get him to sign some books ahead of.
Oh, nice.
There is a proviso, a contract that people sign if they want an autographed book. They will not put it on eBay for 10 years. Or they can't buy it.
All right. So with the Mesa Preservation Foundation, I mean, it's like you've got the diving lady you've saved. I know there's been efforts now for the Kiva motel that's in a quandary situation. What do we know what the future of the Buckhorn is?
Well, that's a very good question. And I don't know how much time we've got, but we were instrumental in 2013 or 15. The city, after the 28 Great Recession, parks around town had really deteriorated. So they put a bond package together to improve the parks and make up for the time lost. And there was money in that package for the acquisition of the Buckhorn. So it passed unanimously, and then the city tried for for 2 years to purchase it. But internally, there was some family issues that had to be litigated, and the member of the family that finally got it had no interest other than money. So he started raiding the interior, putting things on eBay, really destroying a lot of the artifactual history of the Buckhorn. And the city just wasn't able to effect a purchase. And so since then, it's gone through two hands. The current owner has said, yes, they are going to restore it, but there hasn't been a lot of evidence. You were out there just a few days ago. The canopy that was in front has now been removed, which gives it a whole different appearance. So I would say it's endangered, it's tenuous. I don't think we'll ever lose the sign. There would be such an outcry if that happened. In the meantime, while you're mentioning neon, we work closely, or the Mesa Preservation Foundation works closely with the city, and we've been able now to save and put into storage about 25 historic signs. And we may have a couple of outstanding ones that next time we talk, Marshall, I might be able to reveal.
Nice.
Not Mesa signs, but that were in Phoenix. It's not for sure yet, but we're working closely with the city, which has remodeled the old historic post office. It's now called the Post. It will open in August, and then the area behind it will be restored into a public performance space, a gathering space, and about a half a dozen neon signs, including Watson's Flowers, Bill Johnson's Big Apple, Dairy Queen, and a number of others will be restored and on display in what's being called a neon garden. So this will be the place in the valley to come and see neon. It's going to be our Las Vegas. And
Nice.
It isn't just Mesa. It's we're part of a group known as the Valley Vintage or Arizona Vintage Sign Coalition. And so any sign that we can rescue from a landfill first goes into storage just to save it. And then as we get the money and the resources, it's restored and will go on display. So eventually in downtown Mesa, there may be 25, 30 signs.
I look forward to that.
And then we don't have to do a bus tour. We can just walk people around.
It'll be much easier to do at that point.
And I got to tell you, I've always enjoyed when we did those tours. And I think the public really liked it. And maybe it's time to put another one together, although most of the signs that we took people on the tour are now in a storage yard.
Wow. At least, at least they are being preserved.
Yeah.
Instead of just going like so many other signs were just put into a scrapyard and sold for scrap.
Yeah. These are not only in a storage yard, but they're stored in a way that stabilizes them. They can't suffer from wind damage or anything of that sort. But frankly, and that may be the surprise, and we called on the public for the diving lady. Nobody else, the city put in no money. They helped us with permits and things, but the $125,000 we raised was donations from $1 to $10,000 and a lot of in kind. And my guess is if we restored all of the signs we have now, you're talking $1 million. So hopefully someone in your group says that's a great idea and calls us tomorrow morning and writes a check, and we'll have those signs up in no time at all.
That would be wonderful. So Jay, thank you so much for coming on, and at least just kind of highlights of the Buckhorn. I know there's so much more to the story, but
the exhibit will run for some time, at least 6 months or more. So people will have an opportunity to come up. But the opening is always is always fun. And thank you again for the invitation. And one thing I would leave you with is the comment that if I embarrassed you, tell your friends.
and get up at 9 o'clock in the morning on August 19th.
Yeah, and heckle the presenter.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, Jay. And I look forward to seeing you on the 19th.
Fantastic.
All
and
right.
Keep up the good work. You're
Thank you.
carrying the torch for history in Arizona. And you're not fully, but partially the namesake of a very dear person who has done so much for the history of this state, and that's Marshall Trimble. And you're now representing the new generation. Just don't sing.
Oh, no one wants to hear me sing. People keep asking. I'm like, no. Now you got my
Marshall's
show.
a great guy, but he's not a great singer either. But he tells great stories.
Indeed. All right, Jay. Have a great night, and I will see you soon.
Very good. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, that was so much fun. If you've never been to the Buckhorn, go drive by. It's such a beautiful place to drive by. And the 19th will be great because I'll have so many photos. And I love they're going to have some of Alice's clothes there. I can hardly wait to see that exhibit. And I know also coming up in August, I think on August 10th, we actually have Susan, the director of the Mesa Historical Museum, on the show as well, talking about some of the other cool things at the museum as well. So, all right. So now we're going to take a little... As we start to wind down the show, we're going to talk about From the Vault. And I thought, since we're talking about an iconic building in the Valley, one of another iconic favorite building that I have, if you've ever watched the movie Raising Arizona, then you have seen this because it's where they lived for a short period of time. It also is still on the grounds of what is now the Phoenician Resort. And originally it was the Jokaki Inn, which started off in the mid-20s as pretty much a tea house, grew into an entire hotel, and so was designed by Robert T. Evans in Adobe. He did many other buildings around town as well. Some of them are still standing and have great stories as well. And I love the fact that if you get out there, that iconic twin kind of towers is still what you can see as you drive into that Phoenician resort. And so as we say good evening, I always want to tell you, if you're watching on Facebook, please click that share button so people can see how much fun we're having with Arizona history. As well as next week, as so many people are now hopping on planes and going elsewhere, we have Ryan Reeves, who is at the Chandler Airport, but he is talking about some of the amazing history at the Goodyear Airport, which you might not much know about. Wait a minute, all the right words were there, wrong order. You might not know that much about it, but it's a really cool story about the Goodyear Airport, which is still there, still functioning. So that's going to be a lot of fun as we revisit that story. Now, please, I love to hear from you all. So if you have any questions, suggestions, comments, I love to hear from you all. Sometimes you give me some great ideas about an upcoming show. So happy you can join us. Now, as we get ready to say goodnight, I always love to give a shout out to Chris and Cole, who did that great little intro video, as well as my friend PJ, who always keeps me lubricated for these shows. And, Jay, next time I see you, my goal is to have an apple martini just for you. Maybe not for 9 a.m. That might be a little too early. But as we say goodnight, we're going to end on a video we actually made at the Buckhorn Baths in the 2000s after they had closed, but it was as a way to try to kind of help people understand a little bit more about the Buckhorn. Jay got me in right on the heels of a ghost tour that we're going through the Buckhorn. And so here we go. And I will see you all next Thursday, 7 o'clock.
Hi, I'm Marshall Shore, Arizona's hip historian. We're here on the site of the Buckhorn Baths, which is one of the best kept secrets in Arizona. It's one of the first roadhouses that's still around from the late 30s. because of the baseball history that's here. You've got this amazing sign that was on the late 50s by Glenn Guyette that's still in amazing shape and still lights up, which is pretty cool. And it's got a lot of taxidermy. It's actually the world's largest collection of Arizona animals taxidermy inside. Now, you'll notice it's kind of worn down on its heels, but there's an effort afoot to try and preserve it. So come along and let's go see what the Buckhorn Baths has to show us.
It was at Buckhorn just 1 week ago tonight. My mama up and she run away. Now I'm asking you, my brother, just confidentially, have you...
Can you imagine having to live somewhere and haul your water for miles? Well, Ted Slager did just that, got tired of hauling water every day, so they drilled a well. And when they did that, they discovered mineral water. And so with that mineral water, they decided, let's open up some cottages. And it became a resort long before Arizona was covered in resorts. Here we are in the Buckhorn Mineral Wells, which is part of the Buckhorn Baths. This would be the spa. So this was an era of gender segregation. So you have all these rooms on this side that were meant for men, and all these rooms on this side were meant for the women.
Shadows are falling around me. Purple is turning to gray. My heart keeps yearning to soon be returning to someone at the close of a day. Shine on Rocky Mountain moonlight, shine upon the one who waits.
Here we are in the baseball room, where many famous baseball players would come and relax before spring training. So you had folks from the New York Giants and Chicago Cubs. You had Ty Cobb, Gaylord Perry, Willie Mays. All would relax here in their private section of the Buckhorn Baths.
May your outfit be prime and your horse the best you ever sat aboard. So long, good luck, and an easy